All right, so we're going to go over the challenge from yesterday. That was, where'd it go? Credit check, we just did credit check, sum pairs. So sum pairs, we're going to do in JavaScript, and it's going to use the jest testing library. So sum pairs, we want to write a method that takes an integer array. So this might be an input and a desired sum. So that's the desired sum. And the output should be which pairs from your input can sum up to equal your desired sum. There may be several combinations, there might be none, there might be one. You need to output an array that contains pairs within arrays. Sorry, how do I state that? An array that contains arrays containing a pair of the numbers that sum up to the desired sum. Hopefully I say that correctly. All right, cool. So as always, we need to fork this over to my personal GitHub. Let's do this thing. 3, 2, 1. Took longer. All right, so I'm going to copy that. I'm going to clone it down. So let's do a git clone, paste the URL, and algo sum pairs. So algo sum pairs, and bring up the coding window. There's our coding window. Put this right here, and let's make that bigger. All right, so we're going to be doing this in JavaScript. So we have sum pairs spec, and then sum pairs.js where our solution should go. So let's do the same thing. Test-driven development. Let's write our test cases. Don't forget to add your test cases. All right, so let's see. Sorry, give me one moment. I thought this was a challenge that had the test cases. Give me one moment. Sorry, guys. All right, some pairs it is. All right, so these are our, I guess, our test cases that we can use and drop them in here. So our rudimentary test cases will be these, where we might just console log them. And we want to check equivalence. These console logs, and then we'll convert it to jest eventually. That counts. In here. That should be correct. All right, question. So can someone tell me an issue with the test I'm doing right now? All right, that's kind of open.
You can't test against an array of 4 and 5 is not equal to another array of 4 and 5 in JavaScript.
Yep, James Kelsey, excellent. That's the point I wanted to highlight here. So this is a topic I'm not sure we covered too much in depth, but when working with data structures, it's actually not quite clear how to kind of compare them. So what James said, and he's totally correct, if we have one array, so I'm gonna kind of just write, let me just create a new file just for whatever, it's called friday.js. All right, let's create an array. So let's say arx equals 4 and 5. And let's create another array. Let's arry equals 4 and 5 also. Now the question is, if I do a console.log of arry equals arry, sorry, arx equals arry. Well, they have the same value, so I expect they are equal. Let's actually run this. So bring up my terminal, go into my JS folder, and run node friday.js. Notice I get a false. Now you might be wondering, well, why is it false? Well, if I use triple equals, which JavaScript has that, will that change anything? Nope, still get false. So double equals, triple equals, why aren't these equal? Well, the thing is, when you're doing equality, it's actually comparing if these, if this data, where the data lives in memory, is the same. It's not comparing these values. So it's saying, hey, is array y the same variable, or is it is it pointing to the same data structure in memory? These are different variables, but if they have to be pointing to the same thing. So if I change this to ARRX, well, now ARRY is pointing to the same thing that ARRX is pointing to. So if I run this now, they should be true because both of these variables are pointing to the same data in memory. Again, definitely not intuitive, but just kind of understand that's how data structures work. So if you create two separate data structures, so let me run this to verify that it's actually true. Oops. Notice we get true because now these are actually pointing to the same exact data structure. When you create something like this, like we had before, these are, yes, they have the same values, but these are two different places in memory. This list is stored totally separately from where this is. Now, this is different than if I do something like this. If I have let x equals 5 and then let y equals 5, well, then you might be saying, well, what if I did console log x equal 5, or sorry, x equal y? Well, wouldn't the same principle hold here? And the answer is no. These are primitive data types. These are non-primitive. What I mean by that, this 5, you're sending x equal to 5. The value of 5 is the same, is it stored in the same place in memory. So 5 is, even though we have it twice here, it's the same piece of like memory that's being referenced. I believe if I can quickly do a Google, JavaScript ID, I know Python has an ID function, address of, is it just ID? Sorry, I was prepared for Python, not JavaScript, but give me 1 second. Anyone offhand know how to get the address? All right, do some Googling. How can I get the memory address? Answer there. All right, maybe there's not a good way to expect it. In Python, there's an ID function, but I'm not going to spend time trying to find it. Just take my word for it that these memory addresses are going to be the same.
I just had a quick question I want to ask.
Yep, go for it.
So if you set both of the arrays to point to the same location in memory,
yep,
does that mean that if you modify the value of one array, that also modify the value of the other array?
Absolutely, and this is something that gets new developers all the time. If you aren't, I know I went over this with a lot of you guys during the pre-work assessment through one of the challenges, but yes. So if you do something like ARRY equals ARX, now it's very, again, it's easy to miss. Like if I do something like ARY, let's change the second index. So, or let's actually append to it. So we're adding a new value to JavaScript is push. I constantly make those mistakes. So let's add a 6 to it. Reading this code offhand, I'm like, okay, I have a variable, I'm appending to it. So ARY is gonna be updated, but ARX is gonna be remaining the same. That is not true because both of these are referring to the same exact place in memory, the same list. So now if I did a console log of ARRX and ARRY, all right, so again, it's not intuitive, easy mistake to make. I want to highlight this. That's the reason I kind of want to focus on this challenge since it's dealing with arrays. But if I run node Friday, notice that both of them have that 6 appended because both are actually referring to the same object or the same array in memory. Now this is different if sorry, Tom?
Oh yeah, this is something called pass by value versus pass by reference. Objects and arrays are passed by reference, meaning that it references the location in memory, whereas strings, numbers, pretty much all the other data types are passed by value, where it actually updates, it creates a new location or place in memory.
Yep. Yeah, so great term to Google if you are curious. So pass by value, pass by reference. That concept comes up in many different programming languages. So if you're still kind of uncertain about it or want more background, definitely Google that at your leisure when you get a chance. But again, so now we have separate arrays. So I changed this from ARX to having a new array. If I do it this way now, let's clear this. Notice that only one of the arrays has that 6 appended. That's actually ARY because that's a separate piece of memory. As in, it's a totally separate array from the first one. So again, this goes back to why equality in JavaScript, and this is key, in JavaScript does not work. As it happens, Python, being your friend, will do it for you. So it's kind of confusing going from language to language, but we'll ignore Python for now. Because most languages behave this way. Python, I think, is a little more magic behind the curtain. All right, before we proceed, I want to make sure this concept's super clear. So if you have any sort of doubt, any sort of question, please ask, because this concept is important to understand for software development. What questions you guys have about data structures and comparing them? Okay, so since we can't just use equality, there's something called shallow equals array. You might have seen this in some of your challenges. So if I do npm shallow equals array, this is again a library that someone's developed to kind of help solve this problem. And when I say solve, it's just an easy way to compare arrays or data structures. So again, it's an npm package. I can copy this and I'm going to install that. So hopefully you guys understand how to install libraries from using npm. So npm I, the I stands for install, which is a short form. You could put install or just have an I. Shallow equal, is that what I want? Shallow equals also, sorry. Let me read this one. Yeah, okay, I think that's the one I want. So I'm going to install that. Notice that when I installed it, a node modules folder came in here. Again, that actually contains that shallow equals library with all the code in it that's going to be used for my usage. Since I created this node modules, I think it's a great opportunity to create a git ignore file because I know I don't want to commit all that. So I'm going to do git ignore. So this again is going to allow me to ignore files from my Git project. These files are still going to exist for my usage on my local machine, but when I commit it up to Git, it's not going to be committed with that project. I know these slashes are sometimes optional. I just like putting them in there so I know it's a folder, no modules. And so when I save that, I think VS Code should auto update. Should. Oh, sorry. I think I put this in the wrong location. Yeah, so make sure your git ignore is in the right location. I had that nested in my node modules. Now, if I say that, yeah, so notice how my node modules folder is now kind of grayed out, maybe kind of hard to see on your screens, but now all these files won't be part of the Git project. Okay, so we installed node modules. We have shallow equals. Now we can use shallow equals to actually compare these. So let's say I was using my Friday.js. Instead of doing equal equals here, I'm going to get rid of these modifications. So as we saw before, this as it is will be false because these are two separate arrays. Oops, no. Okay, sorry. Not what I want to do. I want to do node Friday. All right, false, which means what we should expect. Let's use the shallow equals quickly. So I need to use with my documentation, import, I'm just going to copy. Import shallow equals, and then you can use the shallow equals arrays function. And we're going to break this up to make it more clear. So let results equals the result of that and results. Okay, cool. So now let's run it and see what happens. And get a syntax error.
Hey, quick question.
Yep. I think you muted yourself halfway there.
So the git ignore folder should be in the node modules folder for it to work.
No, so the git ignore should not be in node module. It should be on the level of your, I guess, your JavaScript files. It could be, I guess, a level above, but basically it should not be in the node module folder. It should be next to it or above the node modules folder.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I got my import syntax. I always have trouble with this. How do I do this? All right, so SP bar. All right, well, that took care of it. Require simple. Yep, importing another straightforward. Shell equals is SE dot shell equals. All right, so I'm importing SE as a library, and then I have a function I'm calling off of it. think that should be the last error, but all right, so we get false. Why is that false? Oops, because that should be 2 entries. All right, there we go, true. So what shallow equals is doing is something called deep copying. Again, this is a concept I think I introduced to some of you during the pre-work assessment. But understand there's something called shallow, I guess shallow comparison and deep comparison, or shallow copy and deep copy. Similar concepts, but one's copying, one's comparing. Again, this is basically going to go through each value and then compare the value. So it's going to go through array X and compare the 4 to the 4 here, because they're both at the same index. Then it's going to go to the next index and compare this value to this value. If all of those indices are the same, then shallow equals says, okay, these are actually equal based on the way you're trying to compare. All right, so that's why you have to use shallow equals in certain challenges. In the past, when you're trying to compare arrays, again, equal sign will not give you what you want, is the whole lesson here. I know I spent a lot of time on it, but it is an important concept. All right, let's proceed. So after that useful tangent, hopefully. So our console logs, again, we're just trying to print out a true and false value, but let's actually convert this to using jest. Right, so we're gonna look up jest. I'll just search here. Right, so jest. They have documentation here. Docs. All right, so you can kind of follow their steps. I'm gonna copy this and let's install some jest. All right, hopefully that shouldn't take too much time. All right, let's continue reading on. So we need to import, add this to our package.json. So let me do that while that's downloading. Scripts test, don't need that nested. All right, so we have that. Oops, all right, looks like my tabbing is off. I need to fix that later. Looks like I screwed something up. Okay, dependencies got added, and I want scripts. Please, right. Scripts. After that. All right, so we added that section again, just following the documentation. Again, reading documentation, part of the job. And then what do we want to do here? That's for jest. We got to write some test cases. So I'm going to copy their sample code and then modify it. So if I go to the spec file, let's paste their code and then modify it. So let's give a good test name. So let's say finds one result. And then we want to call some pairs. So SP, some pairs dot, my function name is some pairs. So let me copy that. Any questions as I'm kind of copying and pasting this? Because I know there's questions about TDD, so please ask.
For the testing suite in JavaScript, how do you distinguish tests from each other so you don't like overwrite the test? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think you just name them differently. So they have to start with test, I believe, but then you could obviously add on to it. So find one result.
Oh, okay. I was under the impression that that first part had to always be doing just test, and I was wrong. Okay, thank you.
No, yeah. I lied. Sorry. Let me append that. Test is the function. You distinguish it by the name. So you got to give each test a different name, is what that's saying.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Okay, we need to rename our file to be test.test.js. So for jest, you got to rename your test file. All right. So what this is doing is finds one results. We're calling some pairs, which are a function, the input of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, desired sum of 9. So 4 and 5 should sum up to that. Let me run this and let's see what happens. So I'm going to comment my previous test cases and let's see if we get run jest. So to run that test case or the test case suite, we do npm run test. All right, so test jest is running. And notice we got failed. What happened? Some pairs. Oh, we don't have a solution here. So some pairs is that. This should be camel case. Let's try to run that again. Did I miss parentheses? Oh, that's right. Undefined, is that because we're not returning anything? Let's return, let's just hard code something. Let's return 4 or 5. Clear that, run that. Let's realize it's the same string.
Since your input's an array, doesn't it need to be 2 equal?
Yes, you are right. I was trying to sneak that by you guys, but I guess I need inputs here. So yes, you are right about that. Desired sum. Like this work formula. So it's the same string. Okay, so I guess Jess kind of cues you into what you need to do. So the whole thing I was trying to get at here is going back to reading documentation. So I know someone had a comment previously of, well, how am I supposed to know if I can use 2b or use 2 equals or I need to use something else? Again, there's no magic bullet. It comes down to reading documentation. So whenever you're using a function, you should ideally know what that function is doing, right? We introduce functions to you all the time, but we don't always give you background and like kind of, again, we can't give you a definition for every function, but you should understand what 2b is trying to do. So let's kind of do that together. Jess, I guess we're right here. Is there a search function here? I'll search for 2b. All right, so there's methods, expect 2b. All right, so if I look at 2b, compare primitive values. That's the key here, because data structures, lists, arrays, dictionaries, objects, they are non-primitive. So again, hopefully you understand primitive versus non-primitive. Primitive are bools, or booleans, integers, strings. Those are primitive. Data structures like arrays and objects are non-primitive. So again, always know what your function is actually doing, and that's coming from reading documentation. So this says use to compare primitive types to check referential identity of object instances, yada, yada, yada. Don't use 2b with floating point numbers. So that's something I wasn't even aware of, but again, you can't use that with floating point. You should use 2b close to. So again, if you're comparing decimal numbers, make sure you use 2b close to. And that's, again, something I wasn't even aware of, but good to know. But as the error message said for Jess, replace 2b with 2 strict equals. So let's take a look at what 2 strict equals is, because always good to know what we're working with. So let's go back. All right, where's 2 strict equals? Same types as well as structures, different from 2 equal, yada, yada. All right. I mean, obviously I would take the time to read this, but generally speaking, 2 strict equals looks like it's going to actually compare the structures and the values. Same types as well as structures. Actually, I'm not even sure if that's what we want, but let's give it a try. 2 strict equals. Clear and run that. Okay, we pass. Obviously, we cheated. Like we were just returning straight up 4, 5, 4 or 4, 5. So 2 strict equals will actually do the job for us. And the way I figured that out was just kind of hinted like maybe that's what you want to use. And also just understanding that I need to read documentation to know what the proper methods are. And I know it's frustrating. You're like, well, there's so many methods out there. Do I have to read docs to read them all? Well, you want to memorize all the documentation, but when you are using something, make sure you know exactly what it's doing. That's the key takeaway here. Okay, any questions on what I stated there? So again, understand equal with arrays, understand that the method you're using had to be kind of tailored to your data types. So you can use 2b for primitives, but you need to use something else for data structures. All right, let me create a couple more tests here. So we have find multiple results. If you have a question, I think Susan.
Yes, I think you probably went over this already, but I forget what you said. The node modules folder, does that have to be underneath the JavaScript folder, or can it be just anywhere in the algo sum pairs folder?
Great question. So I believe it has to be the same level as package.json, because package.json is going to look for it. I actually have not tested this, so we could try to move it. I assume it won't work, so I'm gonna
Yeah,
drop.
I don't think it will, because I think that's the problem I'm having.
Okay, yeah, so I guess I won't test that out here. Did I just use my node modules for it? All right, so I moved it out, I guess, so let's test it since I accidentally did it. So I guess it offers me the ability to update the path since I moved it. That's VS Code doing it for me. I said no, so let's run that. Excuse me. Just, yeah, I don't think it, it's still found just actually. So I might be mistaken. So sorry, I'll shrug at that. I'm not sure actually if that can work in some other locations. Good question though. I'll leave that to self-research, I guess. Okay, cool. So we got our test cases. Some primitive ones, we probably want to test like some other things. Let's add one more to test the type. So we expect type, the type of that to be. How do we check? Just test the types. Again, Google is your best friend. How to assert data type of chess. Great. Stack Overflow equal type of to be instance of. Great. That looks like something cool. Again, we could read up on it. So let's to be instance of. Here we go. So basically, we're going to pass in a class. And again, we haven't talked about classes too much. But basically, each data type has a class. So if I pass in a 4, the class of 4 is an integer. That's the type it is. If I pass in a string, well, the class should be string. So it looks like instance to be instance of is the method I want to use here. So instead of to be, use to instance of, and that should be what is it? Array. I think that's what I want to be instance. Probably no typos. Okay, so let's give that a try. Let's say check data type and find one. And I think I want that to be my results. And
You're missing a parenthesis somewhere on check data type array.
Yep, thank you. Did I catch the right one? Type of that. All right, I think I got the right one. Thank you for that. All right, let me quickly paste that in. And this thing, let's see here. No, that's not right. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, cool. So I think that should be good. Let's verify that by actually running it. Okay, 2 failed. To be instance of. What did I screw up here? Oh,
Your ending paren for expect is, yeah.
thank you, James. You have good eyes there. And always a benefit of pair programming. Kind of, right, still failing to. Why is this so difficult? So expect that to be an instance of. I'm actually not sure here. We're failing. Check data type array failed. What else failed? All right. Obviously, we have no algorithm, but I'm curious why this is failing. And yes, this is the joys of using just. I'm just going to mess with it. To be instance of. Don't forget to add your tests. All right. So received value has no prototype. Received value object.
Oh,
I think
you,
you're missing a parentheses.
no. You're saying, hey, I'm expecting the type of that to be whatever. Well, you're getting back an array and you're checking the type of an array, and then you're asking for so it's a return that's to end up returning a string that says object, and then you're checking to see if that is an array, but it's not. It's a string.
I think you have the right idea, Ankur. Array is array of, wrap it, and then just equals true, and that should pass the test.
Yeah, I think this is an issue that, yeah, an array is an object.
Yeah.
So there's no array type, I guess. So
No.
there's a method called isArray. I know I was working with some other students yesterday, so this is why I kind of know it offhand that you got to use isArray. So I guess that kind of threw me for a loop. So let's just say
No,
results.
sorry. The return from type of the call to your function,
Okay,
you're getting back an array, and then type of that array is object as a string.
gotcha. Okay. Let's see.
It's a really awkward way to do it. I think array is array probably makes more sense, especially when you're looking at it.
I'll just go with that. Sorry for all the chaos here. All right, so we're just gonna get the results and make sure it's an array via this array is array function. So forget the whole thing about to the instance of. We just want to expect that the results type. Let's call it is array. All right, sorry for that loop, but now we're just simply comparing a Boolean. Is array return true if the item you pass in is actually an array, and if it's not, you'll get false. So that's probably not the best usage of jest, but we're on that and hopefully pass that test case. All right, we failed one because we don't have an algorithm here. So let's actually quickly do that. We're hitting noon, so definitely running low on time. I'm gonna grab a student solution and hopefully it'll expedite our process. We don't want that. All right, so we're doing some pairs, open link, and let's go to pull requests. We have 13 pull requests. Let's go to, let's get a duo up here. So let's go with Mike and Yaping. Going to click on the solution there. We're doing this JavaScript, some pairs right there. And let me copy all that. Okay, copying their solution.
I think people are going to put extra effort into their solutions now that they know you're doing that, which is probably good, positive.
No, again, hypothetically, if I grab someone's solution that's partial, that just gives us an opportunity to kind of work through it. But yeah, definitely want to kind of just have you guys kind of interact more and listen to me less. So I'm going to take their solution, let's run it and see if it passes test cases. And if not, that's totally fine. All right, 4 failed. Oh, because the name is different. Some pairs. All right, require some pairs, SP, some pairs. What am I missing with the exports?
You need to add the file at the top to import your jest. Shall equal.
Oh, is that, do I need to import jest?
No, it's already imported.
Yeah, I think it's something to do with this exports.
In our test file, we had renamed SP to some pairs. I think we rewrote our function from what was originally presented when we forked over some pairs.
Let's try this. Where did that come from? Yeah, so exporting definitely can be tricky. All right, so we got 1 pass, 2 strict equals, unable to find pairs. All right, let's actually check our outputs here. So going to run.
Where you've got is array SP, expect SP. The way that we have coded our solution, wouldn't we be expecting some pairs?
Yeah, so what you've done here is basically set that whatever's being exported out of here is the sum pairs function. So whatever I import, I can name that whatever I want. So I can name it SP, I can name it, donuts.
Okay,
So basically it's capturing that function as my import.
gotcha.
Usually you import a file and then you can access all the methods in it, but the way you guys export it here, which is totally fine, is kind of just controlling how I can access it. So I think that's fine. It says unable to find pairs. Let's actually test this out. So I think this is this test case. So let's run this and see what it outputs. So some pairs. And let's see what we get. So we're gonna run the file directly. So let's clear that. Let's do node some pairs.js. All right, so we got unable to find pairs, which is correct. Oh, I think I screwed that up. That was my fault. This should be unable to find pairs. So this is, yeah, that was my bad. I didn't check my test cases. Unable to find pairs. See how that does. All right, we got 2 failed, 2 passes. We're making progress. 2 strict equals, 4, 4, 5. What happened? Find multiple, and I still didn't update that. So don't take my example. I kind of rushed through this. I didn't have proper or update my test cases properly. 2, 5 and 3, 4. Here's what we expect. All right, let's get more test cases passed.
On line 10, that should be two nested arrays inside an array.
You guys never miss a beat. Thank you.
Also, 2 and 5 doesn't equal 9, nor does 3 and 4.
Yeah.
Just change the 9 to a 7.
Wow, not having a good day here, but you guys have my back. All right, so I have that. That looks good.
No, actually, you're encouraging the shit out of us, Ankar, because this is what we do every day right now.
There you go, 4 paths. So it looks like your algorithm is correct. It looks like my test cases were terrible. So that's a lesson on what not to do when writing test cases. Always double check your test cases. Make sure that's what you intend. So, okay, cool. So Mike and or Yeping, can you guys kind of walk us through your solution here, just so we kind of understand your algorithm? So we'll start some pairs here.
Sure. Yeah. As I said before, commenting game puts me to shame right now. It's just not a habit that I developed when I was trying to pass the application challenges. So something I definitely need to work with. But obviously our functions taking in the array and the desired sum. We declared 2 variables, sum and an empty list. With the nested arrays, we are comparing the index of the array at I with the or adding the index at I and the array at index j to see if it equals the desired sum. If we get the desired sum, then we go ahead and we push I and j to the empty list array, and then obviously we've got the catch-all. If the list length is 0, if there's nothing there, then we were unable to find a matching pair to equal the desired sum.
Can you talk more about let's talk about this. So the outer loop, it looks like you're just iterating through the array. Can I ask you why this is -1?
No, you'd have to ask Yaping that.
So when we were trying to find the pair of the numbers to match the desired sum, this first for loop was used to looking for the first number of the pair. So if I use the array.length, then the second number would be out of range.
Gotcha. Yep. I think, yeah. So basically what's going on here is the outer loop is going to iterate over these 4 values. It's not going to iterate over this one because the inner loop is the one that's going to look at the buddy, or the one, I guess, one proceeding from there. So I guess the reason is we don't need to investigate this because there's all the other pairs have been checked from the preceding values. So it's kind of a shortcut. I don't think it would break anything if we did this. Basically, this for loop would not execute because I+1 for the last index value would be out of bounds according to this. So again, it's just saving some work there. So they can get away with checking I less than array length -1, because that last value is not going to have a buddy that's going to be checked that hasn't already been checked. Okay, cool. So your outer loop is going to go through these values. Your inner loop, can you talk about why we're starting at I+1 and maybe not 0 or I or something else?
Yes, because the first number, the first number we are trying to find is starting from 0, right?
Mhm.
And the second one we try to find from the next number of the first one. That's why I use I+1.
Yep. Yep, that's great. Yeah, so basically what their algorithm is doing is basically the outer loop is going to start at this 3. That's the first index. So we get the 3, and then we have a nested for loop. That for loop does not want to check against 3 again. So if we had this as I, we'd be checking 3 from the outer loop, and then the inner loop would start at that 3 also, which is not part of our requirements, right? Our requirements, I think said, or I think it was implied, you can't use the same number twice. So in this case, let's say we're looking for a sum of 6. Well, 3 + 3 is 6, but according to the requirements, you need 2 different elements. You can't use the same element twice. That's why Yapping and Mike correctly started this at I+1. So if we start the outer loop at this, we're going to investigate all of these values to try to sum it up with the 3. We don't want to include the 3 there. Yep, so well done there. Okay, cool. And then right here, can you guys kind of talk about what the inner loop is doing?
Yeah, we're just obviously summing up the index, each index. So array at index I with array at index j to evaluate and see if it equals the desired sum that was passed into the function.
Okay, and then if we do get equal value, we update our outputs data with okay. All right, cool. Looks good. Yep, I think you guys had a great solution here. Obviously, you passed the test cases once the test cases were good. So that was totally my fault. And then we have the special case. Again, yeah, if we didn't find any pairs, we want to explicitly return a string that says unable to find pairs, which is going to impact this check. Because if we didn't find any pairs, we're going to get a string back, not an array. So let me look at the README. Yeah, so our test cases need to be updated because we're not always getting an array back. In the case where we don't find a pair, we're going to get a string back. So that's something we'll need to add on. But yeah, excellent solution there. Hopefully you guys enjoy that challenge as well. Any questions about this challenge? Okay, again, the key takeaway that I wanted to get from this challenge, obviously focus on the test development and the algorithm, but the thing that we talked about, please keep that staple in the back of your mind or in the front of your mind or somewhere in your mind that when you're dealing with data structures, you can't use a simple equals. You need to actually compare the values, and that can be done in several ways. You can do it yourself. So shallow equals effectively is going to be 2 for loops iterating through both of these arrays and comparing each index values for each array against each other. So check the first index and the second index against the actual values. All right. Okay, that takes care of some pairs, and I think that's all we need for that.